This is Midrash Tanchuma, Midrash Korach, entitled God's Rules of Engagement. And basically I'd like to start with a question. You know, at some point in this dramatic story, Moshe says to those who are rebelling against him, Korach and his crew, that you will all be punished by a very unusual punishment. Your death will come in a way that has never happened before. And of course, Moshe was referring to the earth opening up and swallowing him. The question is, how did Moshe know? On what basis did he have to declare this without getting confirmation to God that he's going to kind of back him up on this declaration? How did he know that this would be so upsetting to God that this kind of action would likely happen? So the Midrash, I think, is answering that question in an unusual way. The Midrash brings the story of Titus. As you know, Titus did something despicable when he was attacking the Bet HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. He brought prostitutes into the Holy of Holies, a place where only the high priest went once a year on Yom Kippur. And so you see that God did not react to that. In other words, this almost strengthens the question, because God did not react to his own honor. So how did Moshe know that in these circumstances God would react? But then as the story continues with Titus, he gets on his boat coming back, he basically says to God, I'm more powerful than you. Yeah, you could hurt me on the land, but not on the sea. And God says, okay, I'm going to show you how powerful you are. I'm going to take my smallest creature, a gnat, and I'm going to send that gnat against you. And as we all know, the gnat went into his nostrils and grew into this big bird inside his brain, and he, drove him crazy and killed him ultimately. So what is the line that Titus crossed, and what is the line that Moshe felt was crossed here that would empower him to know that God would back him up on his claim? So there's a beautiful chazal that says, Reb Huna Reb Yirmiyah b'Shem Reb Shmuel b'Rav Yitzchak Amar Matzinu sheviter Kosh Baruch Hu avod lekachavim. God can overlook idol worship, Velgila Arelt, and even sexual improprieties, Vashvirat Dam, and even murder, but lo vitel al masah shel Torah, me'asah shel Torah. In other words, if someone is degrading Torah, humiliating Torah, that is the red line that God cannot tolerate. And so that's what's perhaps going on here. Because as you know, one of the things that Korach famously said to Moshe is, Dvarim elu no nistavu aleihem umilvcha tov bod. Remember the famous story, Korach was accusing Moshe of making up rules as he goes along, and they're not in the Torah. And is referring to something I mentioned in the other video, that he asked Moshe about, a garment, a prayer shawl, a talit made entirely of tcheles. Do you have to put on a tzitzit, or a room full of Sifrei Torah, whether you have to put a mezuzah on the door? And Moshe said you do, and this is where the accusation came from Korach, that you're making up your own religion. So there was something, the honor of the Torah was at stake. And I'm just going to bring one more example, which seems again not to fit so well, but I think there is something very beautiful in this Midrash, which actually tells you sort of how Moshe reached the end of his line. The story is of this man who observed a bird that died, and another bird came up to that bird and put in its beak some kind of grass, and the bird came back to life. And the man said, wow, this is amazing. This substance can actually rejuvenate people. So he got some of that substance, he went to another town, and lo and behold, he saw a dead lion. He said, wow, let me check this out. Let me see if it works. He put the grass inside the lion's mouth, and sure enough, the lion came back to life, and the lion ate him. And what's the lesson you're supposed to learn? That, it's very nice to do good for people and good for the world, but when something is evil and potentially harmful for you, that should not be the object of your goodness. And I think that the parable again here in the life of Moshe, as we know, is gallantly defending the Jewish people from all their sins, always trying to prevent God from punishing them. And that's his tendency. Even during these, rebellion, he tried to ask them, if, give them time to reconsider and praise them and say it's how great it is that you're from Shevet Levi, all kinds of honors that you already got, maybe, trying to forestall this kind of rebellion. But at the end of the day, as we said, there was a line that was crossed, and Moshe himself realized it and did not want to do good for something very dangerous. And so he was the one who basically got to the point where he could spell out this kind of awful, unusual punishment that they would deserve. And this, of course, is a lesson that mankind faces in every generation when there is some evil facing the world, and other countries have to decide, do we want to really stamp this out, or do we want to assuage them and hope for the best? Here is a very clear example when Moshe realized that sometimes evil has to be stamped out, because otherwise the consequences can be far worse. Have a great Shabbos.